Viewers, it's my pleasure to welcome back Pandit Satish K Sharma ji from United Kingdom. Pandit ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar ji, pranam, and happy Independence Day belatedly. I don't think we've had the pleasure of a conversation since Independence Day, so I'll just share those greetings with you.
Yes, indeed, and same to you, sir. And there have been a lot of interesting events taking place in England. And first off, the Indian High Commissioner changed a few days perhaps before the Independence Day happened, and the new High Commissioner, Gayatri Isar Kumar, she was in European Community, I think EC, she was part of the EC group. Perhaps you can just bring us a little bit about her background, and then maybe you can tell us what happened on her first Independence Day event in United Kingdom.
Okay, you're absolutely right. It's a new High Commissioner is in town, shall we say. So bear in mind, High Commissioners come and High Commissioners go, governments change. And from my own perspective, somebody who's been in this country for over 50 years, we've had good relationships and not so good relationships. So we were quite interested to see who this new High Commissioner was and how she would settle in, what sort of an impact she would make. And I must admit, by all accounts, from everything I've seen, everything I've read and everything I've heard, I was part of a Zoom conference that was held recently by the Conservative Friends of India. Although I'm not a conservative, I on occasion get invited to these things. And I must admit, I found her most impressive. We have very high expectations of her. I think she's joined here at a time when there's a great deal of flux, and flux presents opportunities, but it also presents threats. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to really good things from her. The first time I met her was, in fact, when we organized to celebrate a Diwali function at the European Parliament. And that was the first opportunity I had to listen to her and to try and get a sense of who she was. And we have very high expectations. I think she's probably been here for over 6 weeks now, settling in gently. And we've got a schedule of things that we'd like to speak to her about, shall we say. But we have a way of doing these things. There's a honeymoon period in every new event, isn't there? So I think at the moment she has been enjoying her honeymoon period. And the usual process is well underway. So a new High Commissioner appears, and the process is that there's a flurry of activity. You know how moths like to gather close to a bright flame. Yes. And so all of the social the socialites, etc., are obviously pouring a lot of attention, having lots of selfies. The social media world is really buzzing, and all of that's going on. The next stage in the process tends to be when community leaders, shall we say, want to meet up, and they then line up, queue up. There are invitations to have dinner at Southall restaurants, shall we say. A person is given pride of position at an event in a mandir, usually a mandir where a committee hasn't been elected for at least 10 years. But it's great to have a new High Commissioner just to keep the troops happy. So all of that process is underway. When it comes to genuine engagement with the political issues, when it comes to genuine engagement with some of the more problematical issues, that's when the work of a High Commissioner really starts. And what happens at that point, we've noticed, is two things happen. One is the political players, they love to manipulate a new High Commissioner. And so they will look for a strategy whereby they can use her to serve their own purposes. And so we were looking out for that particular development. One of the other things which is also noticeable is that there is a transfer of intelligence that has to occur, where her team, she really is dependent upon her team to brief her on what the undercurrents are, who are the good people, who are the bad people, who should she be careful with, who should she be overly diplomatic with. And so that happens with varying degrees of success. So we've been observing to see how that transfer occurs. Now, you mentioned the Independence Day, the 15th of August. Well, I think that will probably be known as the day when the honeymoon period ended. So allow me to sort of elaborate. It's always a high profile. It's always a high profile date, isn't it? It's the date when, as far as the majority of the world is concerned, we shed the shackles and the yoke of being a colony, of being enslaved by the Anglican white British, and started our tryst with destiny, as it was launched, wasn't it? I often wonder whether Nehruji and Shashi Tharoorji have been reading the same books. But it was that tryst with destiny that started. And so it's an emotive event. And when you're in the United Kingdom, there is a conflict, because there's a part of us which is very much invested in the well-being of the British, and a part of us which really is still recovering from the trauma, the transgenerational trauma in many cases, of having been enslaved for so long. So it's a high-profile date. It's a date when there is a lot of activity, celebrations. Even under lockdown, people were doing remote, socially distanced celebrations. But it's a wonderful day for celebrating. So that was the day when some of our friends in the Labour Party thought, well, we can leverage a number of things here to launch a campaign to try and rehabilitate the Labour Party in terms of its relationship with the British Indian community. And so I can almost see a flowchart being drawn. Somebody obviously thought, well, let's leverage the Gandhi name. We have to leverage the Gandhi name, as they do in India.
Yes, they do.
So we have to leverage the Gandhi name. And if you hold an event with Mahatma Gandhiji's tag on it, then it's a little bit easier to get a member of the High Commission to come and preside. It's our adopted mascot, almost in one sense. And so that was something we were watching out for. And then we were looking out for anything whereby a recruitment process would be launched. Remember, our High Commissioners are not really supposed to participate in recruitment drives for political parties. They are not there to promote a party in its agenda of expanding its base in any particular community. That really does diminish and demean the status and the gravitas of the High Commissioner's role and an office. But an event popped up on the horizon, and the event was quite an interesting event. Let me share the invitation. If I can, I will try and get it on the screen. Is that coming through? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the invitation that went out. And anybody who follows protocol will straight away notice a number of things that are not quite right about this. Would you like to hazard a guess, Sriji? Is there anything that shouts out to you?
Yeah, a couple of things. I don't like the optics there. The speakers are all members of the Labour Party, and Gayatri Sarkumar is a member of the Indian government, and there's an implicit thing saying that she's also, by inference, a part of the Labour apparatus, which is very wrong in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Second thing is, she should really be alongside, or perhaps given the prime position in this poster. She is really the main person here, in the sense that she's representing India. And if you're going to have a movement named after Mahatma Gandhi, he's the father of the nation. So I see a fair amount of...
So let me just expand on a couple of those. You're absolutely right. And you can pick it up straight away, okay?
Yeah.
So this is a Labour Friends of India Future Leaders Programme launch. Okay, so it is very much party political. It is about developing and enticing and encouraging future leaders to join the Labour Party. Okay, the point that you made about hierarchy, Angela Raynor, her constituency is probably no more than 90,000, shall we say? She had a majority of about 4,000. She's the deputy leader of an opposition party, which was resoundingly rejected by the British electorate. And it is a party which is limping from pillar to post, trying to work out its own identity as a result of it. So she is by no means on a par with the Indian High Commissioner, the representative of the largest democracy on the planet, and an appointee of the government which has had the highest mandate, democratic mandate in history. And it would be protocol, as far as protocol is concerned, it would be correct for Gayatri ji, Her Excellency, the High Commissioner, to be the principal guest and the principal speaker at an event of this sort. Now, had it been held in Parliament, then it's different because you have the parliamentary host. But this is not an event that was held in Parliament. This is just something that was thrown together for a Zoom session. So that's slightly troubling. That's a little bit of a concern. And the other entities who are on this particular poster, there is our dear Deputy Lord Mayor of London, who we know is a Labour appointee, and Darren Jones, again, in the centre of the poster, being pushed and being presented in what is, I feel, a prime position. And Her Excellency is tucked away to one side. So this is, as far as protocol is concerned, this is not a good thing to do. And frankly speaking, the members of Her Excellency's staff, they should have taken this to task. They should have said, this is inappropriate. It demeans Her Excellency.
Trust me when I say this, Satish ji. I've had events where the poster design is perhaps one of the most critical things that you ever do, and the messaging in there that is implicit is a lot, and one has to be very careful, making sure that the pride of position is given to the right person. So I can understand where you're coming from. Please proceed, sir.
Yeah, we have Her Excellency, who was the Indian government's representative to the European Union. She's had a number of postings to very high-profile countries and postings. And we have Angela Raynor, who, bless her cotton socks, she'd probably make a lovely nursery school teacher or something like that, but her competence has yet to be established. And it doesn't really fill a person with a great deal of confidence that actually this is a genuine desire by the Labour Party to establish with integrity genuine, strong relationships with the Indian community. This looks as though it's been thrown together by amateurs. And that's not what really worries me. Those aspects are there, and I really think that the staff in the High Commission should pay a little bit more attention to these things, but that's not really what worries me. What really worries me is the manner in which Her Excellency has been manipulated in a very, very serious manner. And let me share that with you. Can you imagine Her Excellency being invited to an event where the lead speaker, the principal guest, the central attraction was actually campaigning for, shall we say, self-determination for Punjab? Let's say the Khalistan Punjab 2020 referendum, where there is a lobby who are actively campaigning, protesting for Punjab to be separated from India. Now, that is not part of India's program. That is actually breaking India forces, as we call them. Now, there is no way that one would allow Her Excellency to be on the same panel as somebody who is advocating for the breakup, for the deconstruction of India's national boundary. This is a very fundamental issue. And yet, here we have Her Excellency appearing in a session with Angela Raynor, who is actively campaigning for the separation of Kashmir from India. And if I can, allow me to bring your attention to the evidence behind that remark.
The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and as the Member of Parliament for Ashton-under-Lyne, I've been really vocal on making sure that the people of Kashmir have basic human rights and self-determination. I think it's so important. If we don't fight for the people of Kashmir, we stand for nothing.
That was a shocking video, Panditji, and I'm not sure if Her Excellency knew that stand of Angela, that's what she was standing for, especially because somebody who's just coming in, a person would probably be confused. Keir Starmer is taking a much more reconciliatory approach. He's saying that Kashmir is off the table, Labour is not going to talk about this, and then the deputy leader, numero duo, under him, is taking a diametrically opposite approach. So there is this, there's an internal tussle inside Labour, and I'm not sure how much the good old dollar or the pound has to do with this, because now we know, as you proved in a previous hangout, that a certain amount of money from a certain lobby financed a certain minister's trip. So we kind of know now that there is more to this than ideological stand that somebody believes that, oh, I've heard this, I've read about this, and therefore I believe that this is what it should be. I'm kind of, we are far away from that, in my opinion.
Sridhar, you're not alone. It's difficult to have a conversation with a political party which seems to be politically schizophrenic. You know, we have one engagement with Sakir, and it's all wonderful, and let's all embrace each other and move forward. And then this is the deputy leader of the same party with a diametrically opposite position being presented. But this is information, this is intelligence that the MEA and the High Commission should be briefing the High Commissioner on. You know, as I said, it's a terrible thing. If it were a Khalistani or somebody like that, it's the same level of a lack of attention. Now, we can give Angela Raynor a great deal of leeway. As I said, we're having a little bit of difficulty finding politicians in the UK who are of a really good level of competence, shall we say. I'm sure you recall when we were at university or at college and an assignment was given, you would go and research the subject. You would actually go through, find quotes, find references, find sources, corroborate it, get some facts, and then present something. And if it was of a very poor quality, the lecturer would quite happily chastise you and probably return it to you with an F in the top right-hand corner and tell you to go and do it again. And so one would have expected that for somebody like Angela Raynor, who is going to be interacting with the Indian diplomatic mission, with Her Excellency and people of that sort, to have done a lot of research on the whole issue of Kashmir. And she would have known about the terrible exoduses, the 7 exoduses out of Kashmir from Kashmiri Hindus and the Islamist insurgencies and incursions in those areas. And she would not, I can't imagine she would have made such an incredible mistake had she done her research. And if the other situation is that in fact she is being pressurized by her constituency, then that too is actually something which is contrary to British political tradition. In British politics, a parliamentarian does not have to follow the instructions of his electorate. In fact, his or her electorate. In fact, it's an established principle that a parliamentarian is elected to use their best ability for the benefit of the whole of their electorate, even if it means acting against the express wishes of that electorate, because it's his job to do the research. It's her job to find out what the true facts are. And so between both of those two stools, we have Angela Raynor, who doesn't seem to have managed to do that. And that is actually quite a serious concern. Is it mediocrity? Is it mendacity? I'm not quite sure. I'm a little concerned that it could be a little of both. But either way, the MEA, the High Commission staff, really, I think, let her down. And she may well not have too much of a backlash against her for this, but this is amateurish in terms of her support staff, and they really need to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yes, sir. And so there are other instances happening as the BLM was finding its way through England. One of the things I heard about was that there was a statue of Mahatma Gandhi in the central part of Leicester, and somebody wanted to bring it down. Can you update our viewers on what happened there, and were there any rumblings because of what has been happening there?
Yeah, in fact, it was very much high profile on everybody's lips when it was happening. But as often happens with these events, there were a few people who turned up and made a chain around the statue, holding pieces of tissue to protect their Mahatma Gandhi, you know, Bapu ko bachayenge, etc. And they were all Labour politicians, I might just note in passing. But nothing has come of it, and it's very unlikely that anything will, which I think is actually quite a good decision. So no, that boat came and it's gone, and I think things are beginning to settle down a little bit. I would say, though, that Leicester is still politically in a very turbulent position. As you know, we had all of those very unpleasant developments when Claudia Webb was parachuted in despite the hopes and wishes of so many people there in Leicester. That continues to generate fallout. In fact, on the 15th of August, on the Day of Independence, one of the principal Labour Party members there, one of their leaders, a councillor, a lawyer who works with the local police authority, so quite an experienced and very highly educated individual. He published a letter, an open letter to the leadership of the party, and this letter was extremely damaging for them. If you have a look, Sandeep Magani was his name, police lawyer, and he reinforced many of the positions that we've been making over the years, that the Labour Party has become institutional anti-Indian. And as you know, it's been clearly established by multiple investigations that the problem with anti-Semitism is still very much existent within the Labour Party. And so this adds support to our claim that, in fact, the Labour Party has been anti-Indian for quite some time. If I use his own words, the manner in which he described his treatment, he actually wrote that in recent years, Indian heritage Labour members have been bullied by fellow Labour activists with derogatory comments alongside labels such as Hindutva, a term used in the same way as Zionist is used in a disparaging way when referring to Jewish people. And we know that hate speech against Indians is usually identifiable by somebody tossing in Hindutva or high caste, or all of those tropes that were created during colonial times. They're still sadly very much present. And he announced that not only was he stepping down in any Labour capacity, but he also was leaving the political party in its entirety. So that was a day of his independence, I guess.
Very sad. And viewers, I might tell you that unlike in India, once you leave a party, you don't gravitate towards the other party. You might, politically more or less, people's aspirations are sort of, put in a closet. And it must have been a really tough decision for him to make this call. I mean, after all, elections do come every 4 years, but he must have seen that there is a rising sentiment of whatever he has expressed in his letter. That's probably his perception. He's one of the lead players in the party in Leicester. And it's really sad because, I can't emphasize this more, and I think you agree with me, that for a good, functioning, thriving democracy, you have to have two strong parties. And then the way Labour is, it's imploding, so to say, still. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has really done a number on the whole party, because this is like somebody is really, feelings are really hurt. I mean, that comes through very clearly in that letter.
Yeah. Do you remember when, if I can, do you remember when I mentioned that there was a ban placed on Prime Minister Modi? Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, all the way back to, we've just heard Angela Raynor speaking about human rights and integrity and all of those, sort of virtues that come so quickly to amateur politicians. Tony Blair of the Labour Party took this country into an illegal war. Do you remember? Weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, which never materialized. And yet there has been no sanction against him. There's been absolutely no comeback. Right? This is the same party that imposed a ban, a 10-year visa ban on Prime Minister Modi and confined him to Gujarat. This was the main obstacle to him being able to go to Delhi and actually stand as Prime Minister. For 10 years, he was confined to Gujarat because of this no travel ban, which was a Labour Party choice. And when you remember that it was actually as a result of the horrific attack in Godhra, where Hindu pilgrims were incinerated in a train. And as a result of that, it was a biased investigation that they took advantage of here in the UK. They didn't really consider the opposition story at all. It was really, let's just run with the narrative which suits us. This is the Labour Party that since Tony Blair's time seems to have been falling apart and not managing to reconnect with any sense of integrity.
Viewers, if you want to know more about this Tony Blair incident of how he dragged England into the Iraq war, there is actually a good movie in Netflix. I'm forgetting the name, but if you go and look there, I'm sure you can find out. It's a really well done movie, and it'll give you the whole perspective how Britain got dragged in, how some of the highest members in his cabinet were not really happy with this, and how events played out. It's a really good movie. I liked it. I'm a political thriller junkie, so I maybe it's just me, but it was a really good movie. And sir, one small thing I want to add in about the 2002 riots. So many of you keep saying that Modi, was the cause of this, the riots, and so on and so forth. I want people to understand the one thing that they don't perhaps know. These two bogies that were set on fire, when the train finishes its journey and reaches the destination, to keep vagabonds from occupying or dirtying the train or using it for wrong purposes, the train compartments are locked from outside. There's a key. The key is not something that you can pick up in a hardware store. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and you have to use that key to lock the compartment. And it's unlocked only when it is going to start a new journey. In this particular instance, those two compartments, every external access door was locked from outside, and people just couldn't even come out. And if they tried to break through from the windows, people were stoning them. And there was so much fuel that was stored. So this was a very well-planned attack. And anyone who tries to apologize for this, I mean, come on, do your research now. There is so much that happened in that, so much hatred and evil that spewed out. It's just difficult to mention in words. So I just wanted to give the 2-second my observation that this was a well-planned attack.
But
So
bear
it's a
that in mind. The
Yeah.
evidence was clear. The fact that it was a Congress party who were in government at the time, and even they did not convict the chief minister of Gujarat. And I'm sure that had there been any opportunity or any evidence, they would have leapt at it. But even then, the Labour Party put in place a 10-year visa ban. And, it reeks of narrative as opposed to evidence. It reeks of politicking and, sort of appeasement of vote banks rather than policy, research, establishing what the facts are. And this is a major issue. We really do hope that we'll get some quality coming into the Labour Party, because it's just limping like a creature that needs to be put out of its misery in the manner in which it's conducting its affairs at the moment.
Moving on to another subject, we saw this book release event being pulled off in India, and it had a huge ramification. A lot of authors have pulled their books from this company, and it looks like it has got some roots back to the United Kingdom. Diabolical Dalrymple is at it again, and he seems to have figured in the middle of this storm too. What can you say a little bit about what is going on here?
The last Badshah, he sort of feels himself to be still holding court in Delhi Darbar. But I know it's just extraordinary to be able to pull the plug on a contract whilst a press and a public meeting is being held for that particular book at such a short time before the publication date. It's just outrageous. But from one point of view, I'm absolutely delighted that it's happened. There are a number of things that are happening which really fill one with inspiration and hope. We have seen the manner in which Dr. Swamiji and Ishkaran Bhandari have worked with other people to create an atmosphere of engagement where pretty much the whole of the nation is now beginning to awaken to these issues. And it was really encouraging and heartening to see that once the book by advocate Monica Aroraji had been pulled, straight away we had our own fledgling ecosystem leap into action. I know Rajiv Malhotraji was keeping an eye on affairs, and I know Sankrant Sahuji, who I was speaking to only 2 days before. They leapt into action and said, don't worry, we will take this book on. And it's absolutely certain that this book, the Delhi riots 2012, the truth behind what actually happened there, it will be a peerless book. It's going to have more success than it could possibly have had before. But that's two instances where the general public, the Indian community, the Hindu community have realized that if they do work together and they do actually step forward and say, this is what we want in a concerted manner, huge shifts and huge changes happen. Here in the UK, the British public is on the verge of pushing the BBC over the cliff. And it's because the population is saying, this doesn't serve us, this doesn't suit us. This is an absolute critical point. And I think the more and more we realize that actually we have a huge amount of power collectively, the better it's going to be. I feel it's only a question of time now. You know, the novelty value of a Gora Brit and sort of pottering around, strutting around like a peacock through the lawns of New Delhi. You know, it goes back to a colonial time of aspidistras and pims on the terrace and, you know, Pakka Mem Saab and all of this nonsense. I think it's time we put him into his little shopping supermarket trolley and pushed him out of his positions in his place. I feel the Jaipur Lit Fest that he has architected so skillfully to be an anti-India breaking India force, that too is, I'd be really surprised if it survives to see the next event. These are changing times, and it's just really encouraging to see that the Bharatiya community is recognizing that democracy isn't something that happens by default. Democracy works by engagement, and if you're not engaging, somebody else will. So it's really encouraging to see, and I'm absolutely certain that Monica Ji's book will be an incredible success.
And let's hope so. And lastly, Pandit Ji, you know, IPL is just around the corner, and in fact, my new book, I'm sorry to shamelessly promote my own book. It talks about the nexus between Bollywood, cricket, and politicians. And the man who made it all possible, Lalit Modi, he is still holed up in London. Isn't his visa about to run out or something like that?
Yes, I think his gap year, shall we say, is almost over. But this brings us back to the High Commission and the Indian government and the MEA. I know that the authorities in this country are waiting for the Indian government to accelerate the legal process in the Indian courts. I know that an inquiry has been made requesting extradition. I hear that the response to it was, well, you have to progress in the Indian courts before we can comply with this. So perhaps the appearance of a new High Commissioner at the MEA, perhaps Her Excellency will take up the reins of this issue and see whether she can help move it forward to conclusion. That would be a wonderful development, and who knows, it may even lead back to a cleaner IPL, which we all enjoyed so much. I think that would be a really good bit of news. But yes, you're right. If I recall, his visa expires at the end of the year.
Excuse me. Now, we've covered a whole stretch of events now. Perhaps you can summarize the state of COVID in United Kingdom and the economy post-Brexit, how things are going, and then we can bring this conversation to a close.
Well, a lockdown is a great subject to conclude on. Good things and bad things. Let me share some things which I found to be quite extraordinary. This morning I went for a walk with my little black Labrador, Oscar, and it was pouring with rain. We're in the summer in Britain here, and one remarkable thing I noticed is that after the rain had passed, the cars were actually clean. Now, we have for decades seen after the rain, cars are covered in dust, and yet all of a sudden the air and the water and the skies are all so much cleaner. So I'm very relieved and heartened to see that the earth is actually breathing a sigh of relief. And, you know, it's saying, okay, I can take a breath and I can start to put some systems in to recover. Putting that to one side, this has been a challenge, and it would be a challenge, I'm sure, for any administration, where the unknowns, the variables, the speed, all of those things, for a government, it's been akin to trying to drive a car where the steering wheel isn't actually permanently fixed and moves sort of later, and the wheels are not pointing in the same direction, and you're still trying to navigate it to a direction. There's a bumpy road and there's traffic all around you. Immensely unpredictable. But bearing that in mind, I think the government and indeed the health service and the medical practitioners have tried to cope with it as best as they possibly can. What we're moving towards now is, I think, still a lack of confidence in the science that has been shared. People are very unsure about the inconsistencies, and there are many inconsistencies in what the science is actually projecting. But we're moving to a stage of localized lockdowns. So particular areas are identified, and if it seems to be an increase in the cases in that particular area, then particular restrictions are applied. Leicester, I think we spoke about it as being a hotspot. I know that Debbie Abrahams's constituency has been identified as a hotspot, and so there are hotspots around the country. The other side is that a solution has to be found to unlock this period of zero economic activity. So there's a tension between the two, the desire not to harm the population in terms of its health, but also the desire not to harm the population in terms of economic progress. And so I think we're going to see that tension result in increasing numbers of local lockdowns, but by and large the economy being opened up very, very rapidly. We have falling numbers, but I think the last time I checked, on a per capita basis, the performance in India has actually been quite remarkable. The statistics of deaths due to COVID per capita is a completely different order to what was originally expected. I recall that the surrounding area of Mumbai had been projected by the World Health Organization right at the outset as being an area where there'd be such carnage and devastation and loss of life. And yet I know that the government, Modi's government, immediately flooded the area with hydroxychloroquine, and hopefully the impact of that particular treatment is what's caused the figures to be so potentially positive as compared to what we were thinking of. So we have issues still to hand. We're still under lockdown. Economic activity is slowly beginning to start, but the social life of the country is really taking a hammering. We have seen recently exam issues. I know in India, the Jeet and the knee issue, which Dr. Swamiji has been championing, we have seen its counterpart here, where results were actually predicted by algorithm, and it created all sorts of anomalies. And so students are now struggling to understand where they go, when they go, what's the impact going to be on careers and on future educational establishments. I know that the universities, all of their planning, all of their budgeting, all of their projections completely thrown out of the water. Many people had now given offers which are far in excess of places that are available. So this well-oiled machine of an economy in every way, shape and form is really subjected to strains and stresses. And the sooner it can move back to being in motion in the direction that it's more accustomed to, the better it will be. How are things over there in the US? I understand that California is really struggling with fires. San Jose has been evacuated, I think.
Yes, for the first time in my 30 plus years of living in San Jose area, we got evacuation warnings, but luckily we did not have to evacuate. But see, what I do, where I'm located, is right by the side of Calaveras Fault. Those of you who might have seen James Bond movie, one of them talks about this. So the fire is raging on the other side of the slope. But when the wind blows, the fire doesn't have gravity issues. It can go up or down. And it was feared that it might scale up and start coming down to where the houses were there. And in fact, the very first thing that it would have encountered was perhaps the biggest Sikh Gurudwara in all of Northern America, the Sikh Gurudwara of San Jose. But luckily, that has not happened. The air is still pretty bad, but we're back and picking up and moving on. In terms of COVID itself, some universities tried opening, and they're seeing a very high incidence of COVID positive patients. I don't know how this is going to play out. California has been playing it safe. All the universities for the first semester, everybody is going to take online classes, except when you have to do labs, where perhaps, if you're an engineering student, you have to go to the lab and do things. But they're trying to regulate that. And the same goes for high school students also. So this has never happened before, unprecedented. So we have to wait and see how this plays out. The schools have just started this week. So we'll wait and see how things play out. And it was an excellent conversation we had today, Panditji. And I look forward to more such invigorating conversations. And once again, namaskar.
Pranamji Sriji, and stay well, stay safe, and hope the family and everybody else comes through this without too much harm. So best wishes, and let's speak soon.
Thank you, sir.